Hello everyone, welcome back to r/nosleep. Last time we left off, I read some stories about following rules. I read, 3 stories about all, following rules. One was, follow the rules while you stay the night, and then that didn't turn out well. And then second story was don't look at the whistling thing. And the third one was the search and rescue officer who was told not to go up the stairs. I'm starting off this part with part 2 of the search and rescue officer story because it's one of my favorites. Anyways, as far as missing persons go, I'd say about half the calls I get are related to that. The others are rescue calls. People who fall down cliffs and hurt themselves, get injured by fire. You wouldn't believe how often this happens. Mostly drunk kids. Get bitten or stung by animals or insects. We're a tight team, and we have veterans who are excellent at finding signs of lost people. That's what makes these cases, where we never find any trace of them, so frustrating. I apologize if this music is a bit loud. I think the music is playing. One in particular was upsetting for all of us because we did find a trace of them, but it just led to more questions than answers. Hold on. That should be better. An older man had been hiking alone on a well-established trail, but his wife called to say that he hadn't come home when he should have. Apparently, he had a history of seizures, and she was worried that he hadn't taken his medication and had suffered one out on the trail. Before you ask, I have no idea why he thought it was okay to go out alone, or why she didn't go with him. I don't ask about that kind of thing, because past a certain point, it really doesn't matter. Someone is missing, and it's my job to find them. We went out in a standard search formation, and it wasn't long before one of our vets found signs that the guy had gone off the trail. We grouped up and followed him, spreading out in a fan to make sure we were covering as much ground as possible. Suddenly, a call comes over the radio telling us to all head back to the vet's location, and we come right away, because this usually means the missing person is injured, and we need a full team to help get them out safely. We meet back up, and the vet is just standing at the base of a tree with his hands on the sides of his head. I ask my buddy what's going on, and he points up into the branches of this tree. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there was a walking stick dangling from a branch at least 30 feet off the ground. The little strap thing on the handle had been has been looped around the branch, and it's just hanging there. There's no way the guy could have tossed it up there that far, and we don't see any other signs that he's still in the area. We call up into the tree, but it's obvious no one's in it. We're all just sort of left scratching our heads. We keep searching for the guy, but we never find him. We even bring our canines out, but they lose his scent long before this tree. Eventually, the search is called off because there are other calls we have to attend to. Past a certain point, there's not much we can do. The guy's wife called us every day for months, asking if we'd found her husband, and it was heartbreaking to hear her get more and more hopeless each time. I'm not sure why this call in particular was so upsetting, but I think it was just the sheer improbability of it. That and the questions that were raised. How the hell had this guy's cane ended up there? Did someone kill him and toss it up there as some weird trophy? We did our best to find him, but it was almost like a taunt. We still talk about that one from time to time. That is weird. How did that happen? It's like, it seems like he wasn't actually in the area except for his cane. Because it said the canines weren't, lost scent before the tree. So it's weird. Anyways, next story. Missing kids are the most heartbreaking. Doesn't matter what circumstances they go missing under, it's never easy, and we always dread the ones we find deceased. It's not common, but it does happen. David Holidays talks about a lot of kids SAR teams find in places they shouldn't be or couldn't be. I can honestly say I've heard about this kind of thing happening more than I've seen it, but I'll share one of the ones that I think about a lot that I witnessed personally. A mother and her 3 kids were out for a picnic in an area of the park that had a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other is about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and according to her, she never lets them out of sight at any time. She never saw anyone else in the area either, which is important. She packs their stuff up and they start to head back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very clearly established trail. It's almost impossible to get lost getting from the parking area to it, unless you're deliberately going off the path like an imbecile. Her kids are walking in front of her when she hears what sounds like someone coming up the path behind her. She turns around, and in the 4 or so seconds she's not looking, her 5-year-old son vanishes. She figures he's stepped off the trail to pee or something, and she asks her other 2 where he went. They both tell her that a big man with a scary face came out of the woods next to them, took the kid's hand, and led him into the trees. The 2 remaining kids don't seem upset. In fact, she says later that it seems like they've been drugged. They're sort of spacey and fuzzy, so of course she freaks out, starts looking frantically in the area for her kid. She's screaming his name, and she says at one point she thinks she heard him answer her. Now obviously she can't go blindly running into the woods. She's got the other 2 kids, so she calls the police and they send us out immediately. We respond and we start the search for him. Over the course of this search, which spans miles, we never find a single trace of the kid. Canines can't pick up any scent. We don't find any clothing or broken brushes or literally anything that would signify a child being there. Of course, there's suspicion about the mother for a while, but it's pretty clear that she's completely destroyed by the whole thing. We looked for this kid for weeks with a lot of volunteer help, but eventually the search peters out and we have to move on. The volunteers keep searching though, and one day we get a call on the radio letting us know that a body has been found and needs to be recovered. They tell us the location and none of us can believe it. We figure it has to be a different kid, but we go out there and about 50 miles from the site where he vanished, and sure enough, we find the body of the kid we've been looking for. I have been trying to figure out how this kid got where he did ever since we found him, and I've never come up with an answer. A volunteer just happened to be in the area because he figured he might as well look in places no one else would think to, on the odd chance the body had been dumped. He comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope, and halfway up he sees something. He looks through his binoculars, and sure enough, it's the body of a little boy stuffed in a little opening in the rock. He recognizes the color of the kid's shirt, so he knows right away that it's the missing boy. That's when he calls it in, and we're dispatched. It took us almost an hour to get his body down, and none of us could believe what we were seeing. Not only was this kid 15 miles from where he'd started, there was no possible way he could have gotten up there on his own. The slope is treacherous, and it's hard even for us with our climbing gear. A 5-year-old boy had no way of getting up there, and of that I'm certain. Not only that, but the kid doesn't have a scratch on him. His shoes are gone, but his feet aren't damaged or dirty, so it wasn't as if an animal dragged him up there. And from what we can tell, he hasn't been dead that long. He'd been out there over a month by that point, and it looked like he'd only been dead for at most a day or 2. The whole thing was unbelievably strange and was one of the most disconcerting calls I've been on. We found out later that the coroner determined the kid had died from exposure. He'd frozen to death, probably late at night, 2 days before we found him. There were no suspects and no answers. To date, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Give me 1 second, I'll be right back. Sorry, I saw something crawling up my wall. It's a giant spider. Cool. can't reach it, so I'm just gonna have to leave it be. Anyways, yeah, like, wasn't there a story in the last part where it's like a big man with a scary face, like the bear man? It's still really loud. Yeah, it's weird. So far, these stories are just spooky. Like, give me the scares. One of my first jobs as a trainee was a search op for a 4-year-old kid that had gotten separated from his mom. This was one of those cases where we knew we were going to find him because the dogs were on a strong scent trail and we saw clear signs that he was in the area. We ended up finding him in a berry patch about half a mile from where he'd last been seen. Kid wasn't even aware that he'd wandered that far. One of the vets brought him back, which I was glad for because I'm not really good with kids, and I find it hard to talk to them and keep them company. As my trainer and I are headed back, she decides to take me on a detour to show me one of the hot spots where we tend to find missing people. It's a natural dip in the land near a popular trail, and people will usually move downhill because it's easier. We hike out there, it's a few miles away, and we get there in about an hour or so. As we're walking around the area and she's pointing out places she's found people in the past, I see something in the difference. Now, this area we're in is about 8 miles from the main parking area, though there's back roads you can take to get closer if you don't want to hike that far. But we're on state protected land, which means there can't be any kind of commercial or residential development out there. The most you'll ever see is a fire tower or makeshift shelter that homeless people think they can get away with building. But I can see from here that whatever this thing is has straight edges, and if there's one thing you learn quickly, it's that nature rarely makes straight lines. I point it out, but she doesn't say anything. She just hangs back and lets me wander over and check it out. I get within about 20 feet of it, and all the hair on the back of my neck stands up. It's a staircase in the middle of the fucking woods. In the proper context, it would literally be the most benign thing ever. It's just a normal staircase with beige carpet and about 10 steps tall. But instead of being in a house where it obviously should be, it's out here in the middle of the woods. The sides aren't carpeted, obviously, and I can see the wood it's made of. It's almost like a video game glitch, where the house has failed to load completely, and the stairs are the only thing visible. I stand there, and it's like my brain is working overtime to try and make sense of what I'm seeing. My trainer comes and stands next to me, and she just stands there casually looking at it as if it's the least interesting thing in the world. I ask her what the fuck this thing is doing here, and she just chuckles. Get used to it, rookie. You're gonna see a lot of them. I start to move closer, but she grabs my arm hard. I wouldn't do that, she says. Her voice is casual, but her grip is tight, and I just stand there looking at her. You're gonna see them all the time, but don't go near them. Don't touch them. Don't go up them. Just ignore them. I start to ask her about it, but something in the way she's looking at me tells me that it's best if I don't. We end up moving on, and the subject doesn't come up again for the rest of my training. She was right, though. I say about every 5th call I go on, I end up running across a set of stairs. Sometimes they're relatively close to the path, maybe within 2 or 3 miles. Sometimes they're 20, 30 miles out, literally in the middle of nowhere, and I only find them during the broadest searches or training weekends. They're usually in good condition, but sometimes it looks like they've been out there for miles. All different kinds, all different sizes. The biggest I ever saw looked like they came out of a turn-of-the-century mansion and were at least 10 feet wide, with steps leading up at least 15 or 20 feet. I tried talking about it with people, but they just give me the same response my trainer did. It's normal, don't worry about it, they're not a big deal, but don't go close to them or up them. When trainees ask me about it now, I give them the same response. I don't really know what else to tell them. I'm really hoping someday I get a better answer, but it hasn't happened yet. This is another one that was less spooky and more sad. Oh, I didn't get my thoughts on that last one. The stairs. What does it mean? Like, if I was out in the woods, like, and I saw, like, a set of stairs, I would, like, be both, like, fascinated as well as scared. Like, I don't think I would go up them myself. Just because, like, ooh, a set of stairs, especially if there's like a door at the top. It's like, no. That doesn't seem good. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. Anyways, less spooky and more sad. A young man went missing late in winter when realistically no one should be going out that far onto the trails. We close a lot of them, but some remain open year-round unless there's a shitload of snow. We didn't opt for him, but we had about 6 feet of snow on the ground. It was an unusually heavy snow year, and we knew it wasn't likely that we'd find him until spring when the thaw came. Sure enough, when the first big thaw came, a hiker reported a body a little ways off the main trail. We found him at the base of a tree in a pile of melted snow. I knew right away what had happened, and it scared the living shit out of me. Most of you who ski or snowboard or spend any amount of time on a mountain will probably have guessed too. When snow falls, it doesn't collect as thick in the areas beneath the branches. It happens most with fir trees because they have a sort of closed umbrella shape. So what you end up with is a space around the base of a tree that's filled with a mixture of loose, powdery snow, air, and branches. They're called tree wells, and they're not immediately obvious if you don't know what you're looking for. We put up signs in the Welcome Center, big ones, letting people know how dangerous they are, but every year that we get an unusual amount of snow, at least one person doesn't read them or doesn't take the warning seriously, and we find about it in spring. My best guess is that this young man was hiking and got tired, or maybe a cramp from walking in the deep snow. He went to go sit at the base of the tree, not knowing that there was a tree well, and fell in. He got stuck with his feet up and the surrounding snow caved in around him. Unable to free himself, he suffocated. It's called a snow immersion suffocation, and it doesn't usually happen except in really deep snow. But if you get stuck in a weird position like this guy did, even 6 feet of snow can be lethal. What scared me the most was imagining how he must have struggled, upside down in the freezing cold. He didn't die quickly. The snow would have formed a dense, heavy pile on top of him, and it would have been literally impossible to get out. As it got harder to breathe, he would have known what was happening. I can't even imagine what he was thinking about in his last moments. A lot of my less outdoorsy friends want to know, I keep forgetting to give my thoughts. It's like, that's just sad. It's like, suffocating to death would be terrible. Like, that's one of, like, the only ones, like, one of the only deaths that I would hate going out with. It's like, I'd rather just go out like a painless death rather than suffer for, like, who knows how long. It bothers me that the spider disappeared. I don't know where it went. It bothers me. Anyways, less outdoorsy friends want to know if I've ever seen the Goat Man while I've been out on calls. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I've never had anything quite like that happen. I guess the closest was the whole black-eyed man thing, but I didn't see anything. However, there was one call where I had something kind of similar happen, but I'm not sure I'm willing to chalk it up to the Goat Man. We'd gotten a report that an older woman had fainted along one of the trails and needed assistance getting back down to the main area. We hike up to where she's at, and her husband is just beside himself. He runs, well, I guess more jogs to us and tells us that he was a little ways off the trail looking at something when his wife started screaming behind him. He runs back to her and she's passed out on the trail. We get her on a backboard, and as we're getting her down to the Welcome Center, she comes to and starts screaming again. I calm her down and ask her what happened. I can't remember verbatim what she said, but essentially what happened was this. She'd been waiting for her husband when she started hearing this really strange sound. She said it sounded like sort of like a cat, but it was off somehow. She couldn't quite figure out why. She went a little ahead to try and hear it better, and it sounded like it was coming closer. She said the closer it got, the more uneasy she was, until she finally figured out what was wrong. I do remember this next part because it was so weird that I don't think I could forget it if I tried. It wasn't a cat. It was a man saying the word meow over and over. Just meow, meow, meow. But it wasn't a man. It couldn't have been, because I've never heard a man make his voice buzz like that. I thought my hearing aid was going out, but it wasn't. I adjusted it and it still sounded all buzzy. It was awful. He was coming closer, but I didn't see him. And the closer he got, the more scared I was. And the last thing I remember was a shape coming out of the trees. I guess that's when I fainted. Now, obviously, I'm a little perplexed as to why a guy would be out in the fucking woods chanting meow meow at people. So once we get down the mountain, I tell my superior that I'm gonna go search the area to see if I can find anything. He gives me the go-ahead, and I grab a radio and hike back to where she fainted. I don't see anyone, so I keep going about a mile more, and when I head back, I go off the trail to see if I can figure out where she saw him coming from. It's almost sunset by this point, and I don't have any desire to be out at night alone, so I just sort of write it off and make a mental note to check it out again tomorrow. But as I'm headed back, I start to hear something in the distance. I stop and I call out for anyone in the immediate area to identify themselves. The sound didn't come closer or get louder, but it sounded exactly like a man saying meow meow in this really odd monotone. As comical as it makes it sound, it was almost like that guy on South Park with the electrolarynx, Ned. I go off the trail in the direction I think it's coming from, but I never seem to get closer. It's almost like it's coming from all directions. Eventually, it just sort of fades out, and I ended up going back to the Welcome Center. I didn't get any further reports like that, and even though I went back into that area, I never heard that exact sound again. I suppose it could have been some stupid kid out there fucking with people, and even I have to admit it was weird. Okay, that's the end of that story. Yeah, that would be really creepy, especially if I saw what was making that noise. It's like, is it Sonic the Hedgehog? No, like I can just imagine just like a white like dude with like frizzy hair just going meow meow. Just yeah. Did I say that I had nightmares last night about the stories that I read? Probably not, but I did. Okay. See if it switches to the next story. Hold on. There we go. A package marked return to sender. My neighbor is one of those annoying wannabe YouTube personalities. Over the years, I've seen him cough out cinnamon, lay flat on the hood of his car as it slowly creeps down the driveway, and douse himself in lukewarm water, all the while screaming, "Epic win! Epic fail!" or, fuck, epic maintenance of the status quo, for all I know. It can get tiring to watch him go about his shenanigans in the pursuit of viral fame. So when he knocked on my door the other day, told me he was going away for a few weeks, and asked that I get his mail, honestly, it was a relief. I can't explain the peace of mind I had knowing I didn't have to brace myself for any of his stupidity for a while. I was always afraid his stunts would wind up bleeding over into my life. Things were pretty normal for the first couple of days. He received a few bills, a bit of spam, and what I can only assume was a birthday card. Then one evening, I got home to find a cardboard box waiting on its front porch. In big red letters, what was written, "Return to sender." Now, I'm no small fry, but I admit I had trouble lifting the box on my own. It was really freaking heavy. Lugging it across the road to my house was even harder, and I quickly realized there was no way I was going to drag it up the stairs and through my front door. I decided I'd leave his package in my garage. It wasn't like I kept my car in there. The garage door was a piece of shit that refused to open without a good thug and a whack. It was less trouble just leaving the car in the driveway than it was to fight with the garage door every morning and night. In hindsight, I should have set the package down while I struggled to open the tricky door, but you know how it is when you got a good grip on something, no point in setting it down if you don't have to. It was as I kicked the door for a third time that I lost my grip on the package and it fell to the ground. I heard a light crack inside. Shit, I cursed. I hope I hadn't broken anything important, but figured I just wouldn't tell my neighbor about it and let him assume the break happened en route. Hands-free, I finally managed to get the garage door unstuck, and boy did it screech in protest as it rolled up and over me. I dragged the box the rest of the way, setting it in the corner for whenever my neighbor would come back to claim it. And then I forgot all about it, until a few days passed, that is. I'm not sure exactly how long it took for the smell to waft in from the crack under the garage house door, but it came in slow progression. It was a sickly, sweet odor similar to a skunk. And for the first few days after I smelled it, I genuinely assumed that's exactly what it was. Roadkill that had left its mark on my house. It was only when I realized the scent was growing more intense instead of fading that I went looking for a source. That's when I opened the garage door, and that's when the odor knocked me back, holding my nose. The culprit wasn't hard to identify. The only change in my garage was the box in the corner. I remember thinking it must have been one of those meat of the month subscription boxes. The meat must have gone rancid from being left out of the fridge for so long. How much meat could have been in there for the box to have been so large and heavy? An entire freaking cow? I covered my nose as I approached the box, a pair of scissors in my hands. I probably wouldn't have needed them to open it, as it had become soggy enough at the bottom to poke through with a finger, but I wasn't about to poke my finger into spoiled meat juices. I don't like that. That soggy bottom was the reason I had to open the box in the first place. If I tried to drag it out whole, everything would spill onto the floor. I was going to have to dump the pieces of meat one garbage bag at a time and take them down to the dumpster, a process I wasn't looking forward to. My scissors tore through the tape along the top of the cardboard box. I thought the smell couldn't get any worse, but as I flipped the flaps open, I discovered a whole new gamut of stink. It was like opening a burning oven, but instead of a heat wave, I was met with waves of piss, sweat, shit, and putrefaction. It was so bad that I staggered back and had to force down the puke begging to guzzle out of me. I don't think I could have handled that scent mingling with the horrors coming out of the box. I'm not ashamed to admit I ran out the door for a breath of fresh air, but in the short time I spent in the garage, the smell had become so ingrained in the fabric of my clothes that it clung to me like a shadow. Nothing I tried could keep the smell out of my nostrils, not air fresheners, not a face mask, not 3 showers and a change of clothes. Every second that box lay open in my garage was another second the smell was allowed a foothold into my home. I had to bite the bullet. I returned to the garage, the flaps of the box still open as though inviting me to look. I was prepared, a clothespin pinning my nostrils shut, a garbage bag in one hand, the strongest cleaner I could find in the other, and long rubber gloves to keep my skin from having to touch what was inside. But, as it turns out, I needed none of those things. I wouldn't have to touch or clean the contents of that box. I would only have to suffer the nightmares every night. You see, there was meat in that box, but it didn't come from a cow or a pig. No, it was worse than that. It was my neighbor, dead, still in one piece, but dead. I called the cops, and naturally, they took me in for interrogation. It's kind of hard not to suspect the man with a corpse in his garage, after all. Thankfully, they soon realized I wasn't involved. My DNA might have been all over that box, the smell might have left a mark throughout my house, but there was one piece of irrefutable evidence in my neighbor's own hands that proved my innocence: a vlogging camera. They showed me the footage only once. I'm not sure if they were allowed to or if they felt so bad for me they figured it couldn't hurt. Either way, I saw it. My neighbor was sitting in the box outside a shipping facility, laughing as he told the world how he was going to mail himself across state lines. He'd bought pee bottles, food, a pillow, and a few flashlights. His friend, a guy I'd seen at his place several times to help with his stunts, closed the lid and presumably dropped him off a shipment. Throughout the next couple of hours, or days, I'm honestly not sure, my neighbor recorded a few short clips about his progress. I think I'm in a truck now. I can feel it moving. Must be in a warehouse. Pretty warm here. Still got plenty of food. That kind of stuff. And then on the last entry, the box toppled over. He broke his neck and that was it. The camera recorded until either the memory card got too full or the battery died. There's one thing I didn't tell the police after they showed me the video. One thing I heard in the footage that will haunt me to the day I die. Just after the tumble that broke his neck, I heard the familiar screeching sound of my garage door. That's just awful. It's like, I've seen a bunch of people. Oh, I thought I saw somebody walking outside my window. I was like, what the hell? I've seen a lot of people on online, like trying to mail themselves across the country or whatever. It's like, how stupid can one be? It's like, oh, I get it. It's like for the clout, but still, it's like, what is wrong with you? It's like, it cost you your life. I hope you're content with your content. But anyways, onwards to the next story. See if it transitions. Wait for it. There we go. I answered a spam call. Hello, is this Mr. Henderson? There was no real reason for me to pick up the phone. The spam app on my cell called out the mystery number right away, but hell, I thought, fuck it, there was no one else left in life for me to talk to. Even a debt collector sounded good at the moment. My wife was murdered in 2015. There really isn't an easy way to say that other than getting it out of the way early. It was a random robbery gone wrong. One rainy night, some sick tweaking fuck snuck into our house and shot her. The suspect was caught 2 days later and sentenced to life in prison. He still sits there today. I've worked in web development ever since. The job is remote and the field caters to my hermit-like behavior out here in the woods of northern New Jersey. The lack of drug testing is really just an added benefit. I was perfectly free to fuck up the remainder of my own life. I don't have any friends anymore. Not really. Sometimes. I guess it is easy to look for companionship in all the wrong places. Senior or junior, I replied to the lady with a sigh before sitting into the armchair in my office with a bottle of wine. It was raining that night. The wind whipped the old pine tree in our backyard so hard I thought it might topple. Senior? Said the pretty calm voice on the other line. She sounded familiar, but I blamed that notion on the half-empty bottle of wine. Apologies, ma'am, but Senior died 6 years ago, I said, a little annoyed at the lack of record-keeping at this place. So much reading, I apologize if I stutter a little bit. She paused. Oh gosh, that is not what we have here. I'm so sorry, sir. We were not aware. Please forgive the intrusion and assumption. Would you mind pausing while I check my records? A filing cabinet clicked steadily in the background as static crinkled. My guess was that the woman held the receiver to her shoulder. I chuckled a bit at the lack of audio quality. No, that is okay. No problem at all. No worries. Why don't you start by telling me your name? I asked, cursing myself with a hint of shameless flirting at the end. She giggled. Something about that laugh was very familiar. My name is Emily, and I work with this credit card company, she said in a rehearsed tone. Unfortunately, we cannot divulge which firm over the phone if you are not on the account, which you just admitted yourself, of course. Okay. I'm guessing that you are Mr. Henderson's son, she mumbled while audibly thumbing through papers. Yes, ma'am, that's right, but it's been years. I could not possibly be stuck with the old man's debt, right? I asked hopefully. Well, let's check, shall we? There was a panicked shuffling and opening of books in the background. I am so sorry, sir, she replied with a regretful tone. The rules are in one of these 3-ring binders, and they are very difficult to find. Please hold for a moment. That's okay. Did not know anybody still kept records that way. Do I get an email confirmation of this charge as well? I asked. Excuse me? Email, like electronic mail? Confirmation of the charge? I asked again, allowing my confusion to turn to frustration. What was this lady's problem? We don't do that here. Still a few years away from all those fancy features, she continued. But as you know, late payments are a pretty serious issue. They can even affect your credit score of an individual when a large amount has not been paid. Okay, of course, I said, genuinely starting to grow worried and a bit flustered. What can I do? Is there a Mrs. Henderson in the household? She asked quietly. Miss Henderson died in '06. What year did you say? Oh my gosh, that is so horrible. I really am batting 1,000 today. I gasped. That was it. That phrase. I don't know if it was the way she said it, or the fact that simply not that many people use that exact language, but as soon as she did, something clicked in my memory. My wife worked for a credit card company before we met. Her name was also Emily. The voice sounded like hers, but it was younger, more hopeful than I remembered. What is your last name? I asked. The line was silent. Look, I know that's a weird question, but please, I think we know each other. I can't give that information out, she started. Okay, did you go to Jefferson Memorial High School? Yes, she said, astonished. How did you know that? It was impossible. Emily was dead. The voice on the phone barely even sounded like her. It was younger, happier, more optimistic. This type of dream was actually the type of thing that had kept me up a million sleepless nights in the past. And yet I was awake. Could it be a coincidence? Is your mother's name Eva? There was silence on the other end of the line. Then her mouse-like reply confirmed my suspicions. Who is this? I took a deep breath. Either I understood what was happening or I lost my mind. Might as well enjoy the ride. This next question is going to sound strange. What is today's date? I am so sorry, sir. What? One moment. She paused and shuffled around some more papers. Today's date is July 9th, 1999. It was impossible. Could it be the storm? The anniversary of her death? Emily, listen to me. Okay, sir, this conversation is getting a little strange. Let's keep it to the payment plan. Listen to me very carefully. One day you are going to meet a man. You are going to love him, Emily. And he will love you more than you ever know. I had to give her something to remember. On your first holiday together, he will buy you one gift for all 12 days of Christmas. Sounds dreamy, she replied with a laugh and a sigh. Are you one of those psychics? I am serious. You will marry this man, Emily. He will buy you the ring you always wanted. The ceremony will be in a beautiful one in your hometown. Your entire family will be there, including Aunt Zelda and your grandma from Tennessee. I like this fortune cookie, she said with dripping sarcasm. But 2 years later, on July 9th, 2015, you will be murdered in the house you shared together. She shifted the phone nervously. So what do I do? First, I tried to tell her to avoid the house that day, to never date me, to stay away forever and find a better life somewhere else. But somewhere in the middle of my rant, the line disconnected to the tune of a blood-curdling scream. I called back to find a non-working number. She never answered again. I fell asleep, listening to the thunder rolling through the sky. The scream from that night repeated from time to time, while flashes of her body on the floor occasionally invaded my mind. I never questioned the call. I never asked why. Maybe it was God, maybe it was just time. But yesterday morning, when I woke up, Emily was by my side. That would be really, crazy if, you got a phone call from, a dead, spouse from, decades ago. It's it's sad because it was a terrible tragedy that happened. But the fact that he wakes up with her by his side, after all of that, it's is it part of his imagination or was he just going crazy? Interesting. Anyways, I think I'm gonna do one more tonight. Wait for it to transition. There we go. My son asked me to check the closet for monsters. I didn't need to. I recently went through a pretty nasty divorce, but I got the only thing that mattered out of it: full custody of my 4-year-old son. Lost nearly everything else in the process, so we had to relocate to a new house with barely any luggage or furniture. Truly a fresh new start. I heard him call for me during our first night at our new home. It was a little after midnight, I think. I went to check on him to see what was wrong and sat by his bedside. He was wide awake and asked me to check the closet for monsters, which was surprising given the circumstances. He's still just a little kid, and without even taking into account all the crap he's been through thanks to my shitty marriage, moving into an unfamiliar, barely furnished home must be a lot to take in for someone his age. And you know how they say that your brain always stays half awake when you're sleeping in a new environment, right? That's all pretty much what went through my mind in a flash as soon as my son spoke. It was no big deal, it was all normal, I thought, but something else almost immediately clicked inside my brain. Before I even got to look at where my son had pointed to while he made his innocent request, something was wrong. I turned my head and looked, and it took everything I had in me to not give in to fear and terror, all for the sake of my son. When you become a parent, you have to protect your children, no matter what, always putting yourself in harm's way if necessary, and spare them any and all kinds of things that might hurt them. That's why I didn't freak out. I couldn't, not when we had barely just started our new life, and I had to protect him. And at that point in time, as I sat on his bed, I only knew one thing. We had to leave the room. We had to leave the house immediately. "Alright, champ. Of course," I said, faking bravery. Then I made a request of my own as I lowered my voice and got closer to him. "Hey, how about you step outside for a minute? If there was a monster in there, I'll have to kick his butt all over your room." He chuckled and said, "Okay." I made sure to put some extra emphasis on the word "but" because it's something that always cracks him up when I say it. Fortunately, he got stuck on that and not the fact that I was indirectly admitting the possibility of there actually being a monster. As soon as he left the room, my mind raced as it started to put together the best and most efficient route to take him out of the house while picking my car keys and phone on our way out. When I heard the closet doors slowly creaking open behind me, I knew it was time to go. I jumped out of the bed, exited the room, and grabbed my son. We were out of the door and inside the car and moving in under a minute. I told him I couldn't sleep, so we were going out for some ice cream to celebrate. He was a little taken aback and asked, "Celebrate what?" To which I replied, "Just us two together. I love you, buddy." It was by no means a lie, but I just had to make sure that he was alright and wouldn't think of anything else as we literally fled our new home. As I mentioned earlier, the house was a new environment for the two of us. I'd been there for a couple of times before, that is. Cleaned it all up by myself and assembled what little furniture we had, so I knew for a fact what belonged where and what didn't, and I know his room didn't have a closet. So it was like a portal to hell. Oh, I don't like that. It's like, good for that dad, man. It's like, that's just terrifying. It's like, if I saw like a door or like a closet to like a room that wasn't supposed to have one, I would freak out. Like, I would get out of there like immediately. Terrifying stuff. Okay, I want to do one more, but I don't have one lined up, so I have to look for one. I usually have them lined up, but oh well. Like, I'm looking for one that I've read before that I love. Okay, I already read that one. Okay, I haven't read any of these before. Like, Lord looked at them, I should say. Okay. I think I'm gonna read this one. I'm a fire watcher. I found another fire watcher's unsettling journal at my new station. I'm a fire watcher. Upon moving into my station, I found the following pages typed on my desk. I am not the author of the following. I am transcribing exactly what I found, dated 1989. I've been located here for 185 days, according to my calendar. I'm stationed up in the northwest of the United States with 2 other guys, Clark and Thomas. 185 days, that's 5 days longer than our stint here should have been. Normally, they rotate us out every 180 days. We were supposed to be picked up by helicopter 5 days ago. I started writing this logbook, journal, whatever, because we're overdue for a vac, or so we think. Maybe we messed up the calendar somehow. Our main radio stopped working on day 179. Get up, there's smoke. Bleary-eyed, I saw Clark standing over my bunk. I could see the orange slits of light reflecting on his torso, signaling to me it was the early morning. Teddy, smoke? Smoke, huh? Or, Teddy, smoke? Smoke, huh? I said, still half delirious. Yes, smoke. A really small stream of it, maybe a mile southeast. His eyes were wide and brighter than the sunlight on his uniform. I pulled myself out of the bottom bunk and headed towards the window. I didn't even need my binoculars to see the small sliver of smoke creating a shadow in the early sun's light. In 185 days, it's only the second time we've seen a potential fire. For those who don't know what a fire watchtower looks like, it's basically a wooden cabin elevated about 100 feet in the air. Ours has a staircase that wraps around the structure beneath the cabin. I'm pretty sure other towers use ladders, but that's besides the point. Clark and I bunk up in the watchtower. We have a little kitchen, our bunk bed, and a 360-degree view of nothing but woods. Thomas sleeps in a tiny little cabin at the base of our tower, which is also where our main office is. Office may be too loose of a term. It's one desk and a typewriter used for typing out reports of what we see out here. I rubbed my eyes and looked over to Clark. Alright, let's go check it out. No way, Teddy, no way, he replied immediately. Clark has been afraid to go past the outhouse since day 180 passed. He's afraid a helicopter will come and he'll miss his chance to be rescued. Rescued, Clark would say. But are we in danger? Did we miscalculate the number of days we've been out here? We still have plenty of food. Did they forget about us? Has the apocalypse come and gone and we don't know because we've been isolated? That's one of my worst fears. Because I've been, like, for the longest time, I was, like, cooped up in my bedroom for, like, years and years and years, and I rarely ever went outside. And my biggest fear is, like, not knowing the world ends and then not being able to talk to anyone ever again and being alone. That's one of my worst fears, if not my worst fear. So I completely understand that. Okay, fine, I agreed. Radioed down to Thomas and let him know he should be up. Our main radio back to base isn't getting a sign of life from anywhere, and if it isn't receiving from anywhere, we assume we aren't being heard from anywhere. Luckily, we still have our own walkie-talkies to communicate with each other. Clark took out his walkie. Tom, there's some smoke about a mile southeast. Can you go check it out? A few seconds passed before Thomas responded. After I finish wiping my ass, I'll be on my way, unless you want to help me with that Clarky. Thomas, the oldest of us, is always picking on Clark, the youngest. He doesn't really dislike Clark. He is just easy to pick on. He's a 23-year-old college dropout. I think he studied accounting or finance or something on his parents' dime. I don't think he left college to be a professional fire watcher. No, I think he left to come out in the wilderness, be alone, and take a retrospective look at his life to decide what he really wants. This music is from the, it was played in the Don't Escape games that I played, like, months ago now. Like, I was looking for spooky music to play for while I was reading these stories, and I didn't realize this was in here. It's very interesting. Anyways, sorry. You only sign up for 180 days of isolation if you're crazy or if you want to get away from something. I'm not sure what category Thomas falls is. I'm not sure which category Thomas falls in. He's a cryptic brute of a man. His picture is probably in the dictionary next to lumberjack. He's pretty quiet unless he has a joke to tell or something important to say. Either way, when he opens his mouth, I listen. As for me, it's not important why I'm out here. Headed out now, Thomas radioed. Clark and I watched Thomas start his trek into the tree line until we could no longer see him. Clark cocked his head towards mine. "Teddy," he said to me, "Thomas has been acting different, weird." I didn't expect him to be so blunt, but I had noticed. I knew Clark had noticed, but this was the first time we spoke about it. I know. "He doesn't seem to be bothered that we are stuck out here." We don't know if we are stuck out here. We could have scratched off the dates wrong. You know, we thought we didn't scratch the day off yesterday, but we really did, so we accidentally scratched the next day too. "I guess," Clark said softly. I knew what he was going to say next. "At night, though." "Shut it, Clark." "Come on, Teddy, it's fucked up. He's fine during the day and then just changes. Does he have some type of illness? It happens so sudden." "Maybe he does. So what if the guy goes out at night to stare at trees?" "Trees? Stare at trees." "I know you've seen it. He goes out near the tree line and stands there for a while looking out. Sometimes hours. Maybe he does have a screw loose, and maybe he shouldn't be out here. But I don't think it's the best idea to bring it up to him when we are trapped here with him, especially if he is insane." Silence fell between us before Clark responded. "I didn't know he stares at the forest," he said to me in a soft voice and eyes wider than when he woke me up this morning. "Oh, wait, what? What were you gonna say?" At night," he stammered, "he comes up the stairs." I looked over to our half-open door leading out to the staircase, letting a cool breeze in. What are you... What? "He comes up the stairs and just looks at us, stares at us." Thomas left to go check out the smoke about an hour ago. It seems to have vanished, so I figured he'd handled it. Clark spends his days using our walkie-talkies, trying every station possible to alert anyone nearby. I just watch the forest. It's 11:30 p.m. Thomas isn't back. He left at about 7 a.m. He hasn't answered his radio. Tomorrow will be day 186. We don't know if Thomas is okay, and one of us will most likely have to check the woods tomorrow, and since Clark is chicken shit, it'll end up being me. More disturbing, though, is something Clark told me a few minutes ago. The reason I went back to the office to type this. I was leaned back in my swivel chair, spinning slowly, making sure there were no lights or fires in the dark expanse of trees, and wondering where Thomas was. He must have been hurt. Even if he was lost, he'd reply on his walkie. We always answer our walkies. They're with us at all times, even if we are shitting or showering. Clark stopped my chair mid-spin and mid-thought. Before I could protest, he spoke. "Listen, I need to tell you something I've been thinking about recently. It's eating away at me. I wonder if it had to do with Thomas." "Okay," I said. "I'm all ears." "It's gonna sound crazy," he warned. I bet I've heard crazier. He took a long yet stuttered inhale, then spoke. "I don't remember coming out here." My facial expression didn't change, and it looked like he was waiting for a reaction, so he repeated. "I don't remember coming out here. Do you? Do you remember applying for this job? Do you remember being interviewed or being flown out here?" At first, I was almost amused. Then as he asked those questions, I froze. I didn't remember. He continued, "You know how I said I decided to leave college? Well, now that I'm thinking about it harder, I don't know if I did. I mean, I must have, right? To be out here, I must have. But all I can remember is my last day of class for the semester, and then I was here. I don't remember anything between coming home after class and meeting you and Thomas. I was listening, but it probably didn't show. I was still motionless. I couldn't remember. I tried, and I'm still trying. Thomas is missing. Clark and I are losing our minds, or something else. Either way, I can't explain it yet." There were more pages scattered about, but I haven't figured out the order. Some are ripped, and some are faded beyond recognition, but there was a more pressing and imminent problem at hand. About 30 minutes ago, I met Gary and Harold. We have been stationed out here for the next 180 days. I don't know whether to tell them what I found. I don't know whether to tell them that I don't remember coming here. Oh. There's something going on, regarding the Firewatch Tower thing. It's like, I feel like it's a government thing where it's like, they like wipe like your memory. Like, they make you sign stuff, and then they send you out. Thomas never really left to check that fire. Once in the tree line, he doubled back and would be watching you when you lay in your bunk. That's funny. Terrifying, but funny.